In this screencast, I will illustrate some functionality in Inkscape version 0.46 for desktop publishing. Desktop publishing, for those who don't know, is very similar to word processing, except that it's made for page layout. In other words, it's a what you see is what you get page editor. That means it's flexible, allowing one to move elements such as images and text boxes, for example, among other objects on the page with relative ease without being constrained by the document itself. Several of the more popular desktop publishing applications include the freely available and open source Scribus, which I highly recommend, Adobe's InDesign, and Quark Express. Makeshift applications can be used, like OpenOffice for one, but one would be better off sticking with Scribus for something a little more robust and flexible. Now that I have briefly explained what desktop publishing is and what software to use, why in the heck would anybody want to use a vector application like Inkscape? Well, because you can. But it must be understood that Inkscape wasn't and so far isn't intended to be used as a publisher of sorts. On the other hand, page layout is something that Inkscape does very well. So if one can keep the page layout rather simple, and I emphasize the word simple, then why not use Inkscape for desktop publishing? After all, many of us have used Inkscape to completely mock up websites, so perhaps it makes sense to use it to some extent to lay out your next newsletter or brochure design. Let's take a look at what Inkscape allows us to do. What I intend to demonstrate is a basic page design in an attempt to plant the seed and show you what can be done. If you're crafty, and I think you are, then maybe you can take what I will show you to the next level. So let's begin. Alright, the first thing that we're going to do when we open up Inkscape is we're going to set up our document. And I'm going to go to File, Document Properties, slide this back into the window here, and I'm going to select US Letter, I'm going to select Portrait, hit OK here. Oops. Okay, we'll get that on our page. Okay, now this is the page layout of your actual page. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I forgot something, so let's go back into Document Properties and let's set up our units to inches. That way we can see 8.5 by 11.5 here. And I'm going to set up my units here to inches as well. Okay, now what I'm going to do is draw a page, and I'll draw it the same size as my page here. Okay, so this is going to be 8.5 by 11. And I'll select my Align and Distribute button, and I'll select Page, and we'll center that on our page. We get something about like this. Okay, I'm going to make this background just a little bit lighter. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to do is right click on this and I'm going to hit duplicate. I'll make this a little darker so we can see it. And I'm going to do a path inset. Okay, I'm going to do that a couple times. A few times actually. You know what? I think I'm going to do something a little differently here. Let's back up. And let's make this, instead of insetting it, let's, what we need to do is simulate a margin around here. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 7.5 wide by 10. Okay? And I'm going to go ahead and take this, center that on our page. Okay, so basically what I've done is I've come in 1/2 inch all the way around our page, and that's going to simulate our margin. So what I'm going to do now is select this dark gray rectangle, and I'm going to go to Object and do Objects to Guides. Okay, that's going to convert my rectangle into guide markers here. Okay, now let's carry on. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 columns. Okay, so I'll go ahead and snap on this corner and drag it all the way down. And I'm going to make this column 3.60 wide. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate that and slide one over to the other side. Okay, and just snap that to my borders. Okay, and that gives me a channel down through the middle. All right, now the next thing that I'm wanting to do is let's duplicate this and slide this up, and this gives this a dark color. And I'm going to make this about 1.5 high. Okay, and since I have a guide here, I can just pull that down and it'll snap. Okay, that'll become a text header for me. And what we're going to do next is just pull this down, and I'm just going to fudge it until I get the channel kind of the same size here. And it's close enough, should be good enough just for this screencast. If you want to get it perfect on your document, then please do so. Okay, now I think that looks pretty good. So the next thing that I'm going to do is bring in a couple images. Okay, now normally when you're doing desktop publishing, you've got images to bring in. So I'll bring in my first image, and it's always important that when working with images, no matter if you're working with vector applications or raster applications, that you scale down and not up. Okay, so my image is a little big right now, and what I'm going to do is hold down my aspect ratio, my lock button, and I'm going to make this 3.60 wide. Okay, I'm going to snap that back. Now I'm going to take this gray rectangle, and we're going to drive it down just a little bit, and I'm going to make it about the same. I'm going to get that white channel in through here. Zoom back up on this. Okay, so far so good. Now what I'm going to do is bring in my second image. Nice picture of some money. And I'm going to make this image, we're going to lock its aspect ratio, and I'm going to make this image about 2.875 wide. Okay, and we're going to stick that somewhere down here. But before I do that, I need to get its height here. Let's see, 1.917. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just tidy that up a little bit, change its aspect ratio just a touch so we got good even numbers. And I'm going to make a square, rectangle actually. We're going to make it 2.875 by 1.9. So that's the same size as our picture. Okay, now what I'm going to do, we're going to make this a little bit bigger now. And I think probably the best way to do that is to, let's do this. Let's zoom in on this. I'm just going to fudge this instead of trying to dial in the right numbers. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hold my control key down to keep its aspect ratio. And we'll make that picture, we'll send it to the top so we can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, and it's a little wide, so what I'm going to do is bump this down in the corner. Get something about like that. Okay, just kind of eyeing how this thing will look. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And we'll zoom out a little bit here. Okay, now for our next step. Let's zoom back in on our page. And just for now, I'm going to go ahead and tidy this up. We'll center it up, okay? And I'm going to duplicate this. And let's say we wanted our picture about right here. Just a little off center. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is duplicate this twice. And I'll show you where I'm going with this. Okay, so I'm going to select this. I'm going to select this rectangle over here. We're going to do a path and we're going to do a difference. Okay, to make sure you got it right, let's just move it off, and I've cut a hole through it. That's exactly what I want. I'll do it on this side over here. Path, difference. And I've got a hole on that side as well. Now what I'm going to do is take our picture, take our square right here, we'll put that in the middle, and we'll take this background and lower it so we can see what's going on. Actually, we don't even need that anymore. So let's get rid of it for now. Okay, and that's where my picture is going to go. Now, I have to explain something. Basically what I have here, the dark gray is going to be my text layout on both sides here. Now, typically when you cut something from another shape, it's gone. It's destructive. One nice thing about the upcoming version of Inkscape, version 0.47, which you can grab a development release right now and test it, is they have a live path effect with Boolean operations. So in this next version, you're going to be able to cut shapes from one another in a non-destructive way so you can get back to the history. So if you cut something and later on in your project you decide, boy, I really didn't want to cut that after all, you can turn off that effect and your shape will be back to where it was. That will be a nice little effect to have on page layout, such as what we're doing right now. Okay, so basically what I've done is it is destructive, but you know, we can move it just by moving the nodes here. You do have nodes, so you can select these things and move them up or down, back and forth, and just make sure that you do equal steps on the other side. Okay, but we won't dwell on that anymore. Let's just carry on. So anyways, I'm going to take this here and we'll get rid of that. And let's put some text on this. I'm going to put some header text. And we need to write something here. So let me think here. Let's just come up with something here. And got typos in here, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm the king of typos. Okay, how to make money from that great idea. Well, that's not the best header, but who cares? All right, and let's give it some, let's change its text properties. And let's find something that looks a little pleasing. I've always liked Georgia. And let's see here. Let's go back into text properties and let's make sure that it is centered. Okay. And let's see if we can fit that in there. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Need to make it just a little bit smaller. Okay. And let's go back into our text properties. Let's add a little bit more. And maybe this isn't the greatest grammar in the world, but I think you guys get the point. Let's apply that. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Nice and centered. Okay. Let's center it up on our dark background here. Okay, and if it's not quite right, what we can do is take this, and let's just bump it up a little bit. Dial that back in. Oops, there we go. Okay, I think I got it right. And we're going to take this and just make it just a little bit longer here. Okay, now, if you want, you can take this background, we'll make it just a little bit darker there. And we can pull in elements from our image. You know, if we're looking for kind of something that matches here, I think maybe that looks pretty good. We'll go to our fill and stroke, and we'll give this a radial blur. It's just a little bit lighter there. Okay, that's just adding some little pizzazz there, and maybe we want to make that text white. Okay, so we got that part. Zoom back out, and we're getting closer here. Okay, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some text, and one of the effects that we have in Inkscape 0.46 is a lorem ipsum text generator. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just set that up for 8 paragraphs, 16 sentences, 4 paragraph length fluctuations, and just hit apply. And that takes a second or two, and we're going to slide that text, just slide that text over, and basically this is placeholder text for those who aren't sure what it is, and it just writes some gibberish, so you know what kind of text that you're gonna put in. Okay, and what we're going to do now is we are going to select in order from the right side to the left side both these objects, and we are going to do text flow into frame, and that'll take just a second or two. Whoops, I got to select my text. There we go. Forgot to do that. Flow into frame. There we go. Okay, now that's what's nice about Inkscape, is that flow into frame bit there is very important. And with it you can make basically you can kind of set up your margins and stuff. Okay, so we've got that part. Now what we're going to do is adjust our text a little bit. And I'm going to double click in here to get into the text, and we're going to go to our text dialog. Okay, and I'm going to select, let's go about 110% there for spacing. I'll hit apply, and let's pick something a little bit more pleasing. Let's pick this Granada. And we're going to pick justify the lines. And we get something that looks just about like this. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this gray outline. We're going to make it a light color. And I'm going to leave that in there in case we want to use that later. But basically what we have here is our layout. What we can add to, if you want to just a little bit more pizzazz here, we can go to our text tool and let's just make up something. Okay, we'll make that the same font. Find Granada here. And we'll make that italic. And let's put that about right here. It's still a little big yet. There we go. Okay, and let's zoom out on our page. Okay, so far we've got something very simple. And basically, that's it. That is our desktop publishing page. Now, I haven't added some of the other features here. Actually, let me turn off my guide so we can see what we're doing. Okay, let me zoom in on this as far as I can get it. Okay, but basically what I have here, I have something very, very simple. Okay, now if you can think of this, this might look like something that you'd find in a magazine or something or other. That's basically what we're going for. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when you're making these layouts is your text spacing around objects. Normally, maybe you wouldn't want to put it so big like I have here. I've given myself plenty of space, but you don't want to crowd your text up against something either. A nice little feature too is the start of your sentences. Usually you have a capitalized letter that's big. You can add that effect in Inkscape very well. I'm not going to show you that now. It's just something that just takes a little longer in the screencast. But again, you know, for a brochure or something that you want to mock up or lay out, Inkscape does very well. And it's pretty powerful at that. You don't have text styles. That's something that you'd have in something like Scribus or other desktop publishers. That's a very powerful feature, text styles. But you know, for what we do have, it's plenty. So that is desktop publishing in Inkscape. So I hope you enjoyed this screencast. I'm Heathen X.